She said it right to my face, at my own dinner table, while my husband sat inches away and did absolutely nothing. And in that moment, I made a decision she never saw coming. If stories like this speak to you, like and subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I genuinely read every single one. My name is Serena, and for 3 years, I was the most patient woman I have ever known in my life. I married Daniel at 28. He was the kind of man who made you feel chosen, warm, present, funny in that easy way that makes you lower your guard completely. And I did. I lowered every guard I had. What I didn't understand then was that the man I married only fully existed when his mother wasn't in the room. The moment Margaret entered any space, Daniel changed. His posture softened toward her. His opinions rearranged themselves around hers. He stopped being my husband and became her son again. Completely, exclusively, like I was just a piece of furniture he'd picked up somewhere and forgotten to return. Margaret moved in 8 months after our wedding. Knee surgery, she said. Just until she recovered, she said. That was 2.5 years before any of this happened. And in those 2.5 years, she treated my home like her personal stage and me like an extra who'd wandered in from the wrong production. She critiqued my cooking every morning at breakfast, loud enough to make sure Daniel heard. She reorganized my kitchen cabinets without asking twice, putting things where she preferred them and acting confused when I moved them back. She threw away a pothose plant I had carried through 3 different apartments since college, a plant I'd had for nearly a decade, because she decided it looked, and I'm quoting her here, diseased and frankly depressing. When I brought it up to Daniel that evening, he barely glanced up. She means well, Serena. You take everything so personally. I stopped inviting my closest friends over because Margaret found them too loud. I stopped decorating the way I wanted because she called my taste immature. I stopped sharing opinions at the dinner table because she would simply speak over me like I hadn't made a sound. And Daniel would sit right there, quiet, letting it happen every single time. I absorbed it. I stayed steady. I kept moving. But here is what people like Margaret never understand about quiet women. We are not quiet because we have nothing. We are quiet because we are watching. We are building. We are deciding exactly when and how we're going to move, and we are in absolutely no rush. The night that changed everything was a Sunday in November. Daniel's sister Pauline was visiting with her husband Kevin, which meant Margaret had her preferred audience. She'd been particularly cutting all week. Comments about my appearance, my career, the fact that I hadn't produced grandchildren on whatever timeline she'd constructed in her head. I had spent 4 hours making a full roast dinner. Lamb, roasted vegetables, 2 kinds of bread, dessert from scratch. My lower back was aching by the time I sat down. I poured myself a glass of water, finally exhaled, and Margaret looked across the table at me with that expression I'd learned to recognize, the one that meant she had something prepared. Serena, she said, folding her hands together, voice smooth and almost gentle. I've been thinking, and I want to say this with love, truly. She paused just long enough to make sure the table was paying attention. You don't really contribute here, do you? Not in any real, meaningful way. Not financially. Not domestically. Daniel holds this household together. He always has. She tilted her head, and the warmth drained entirely from her eyes. You're just a burden in this house. And honestly, sweetheart, I think deep down you know that. Pauline went still. Kevin put his fork down. Daniel reached for the salt shaker and kept eating. No querexchen. No hesitaschen. Not even a small dignity of discomfort on my behalf. I felt something happen inside me. Not anger, not the kind that makes you cry or raise your voice. Something colder. Cleaner. Like a key turning in a lock I had forgotten was even there. I looked at Margaret and smiled. You might be right. Could you pass the bread? She blinked. She had wanted tears. She had wanted a scene. I gave her nothing, and somehow that bothered her more. What nobody at that table knew, what Daniel had let himself quietly forget over the years, was that the house we were all sitting in was mine. Not ours. Mine alone, in my name, since before Daniel and I had ever spoken a single word to each other. Before I met him, I had spent 6 years building a real estate consulting firm quietly and steadily from the ground up. I don't broadcast what I do. I never have. But I am very, very good at it. I had purchased our 4-bedroom home 2 full years before our first date, paid for with my own savings and business income. The deed listed one name, Mine. It had never been changed. When we got married, Daniel mentioned refinancing together, putting his name on the property. I told him I'd look into it. I never did. Not out of suspicion at the time, just a careful instinct in the back of my mind, some quiet voice saying not yet. I had learned over the years to trust that voice without needing to explain it. I also paid the mortgage every single month from my private business account. Daniel covered groceries and utilities. He assumed because I never corrected him that we were splitting things evenly down the middle. We were not anywhere close to even. The Monday morning after that dinner, I called my attorney. Then I spent 2 weeks being careful and thorough. I documented 31 separate incidents of harassment from Margaret, dates, locations, who was present for each one. I gathered every financial record. I quietly opened a separate personal account and redirected my income. And I installed a legal audio recorder in the main living areas of my home. Within 10 days, I had exactly what I needed. Margaret's voice, recorded clearly in her own kitchen, saying to Daniel, "She is dead weight, and you are too blind to see it." Women like Serena always run when life gets uncomfortable. You need to seriously reconsider your options before she takes anything from you. I wanted to sit with that. Before she takes anything from you. I chose the following Saturday for the reveal. Margaret had invited 2 of her closest friends over for what she was calling a casual lunch. Pauline and Kevin were there. Daniel was on the couch, relaxed, completely unsuspecting. I came downstairs wearing a blazer, carrying a folder. I set it open on the dining table without fanfare or introduction. Property deed, mortgage statements going back 3 years, and a formal 30-day vacate notice, drafted and already filed by my attorney. I thought everyone deserved the complete picture, I said, since contributions have come up so often lately. Margaret looked at the papers and laughed. She actually laughed. What is this performance supposed to be, Serena? It's the deed to this property, I said. My name. Only my name. It has been that way since 2019. I looked at her 2 friends, who had gone completely motionless. This house belongs to me. The mortgage is drawn from my personal account every month. Daniel has no legal standing on this property, and neither does any guest of his. The vacate notice is already on file. 30 days. The laughter stopped as if it had never existed. Margaret's face moved through amusement, confusion, rage, and then settled into something I had genuinely never seen from her before. Something small and frightened. Daniel, she started. He cannot help you with this one, I said. Quietly, clearly, without a single ounce of cruelty. Pauline reached for Kevin's hand. Margaret's friends looked at each other, and then at the table. No one spoke. Daniel stood slowly. He looked at the folder. He looked at me. And I watched something move through his expression that I don't think he even fully understood. Not just shock, but a long, slow, sinking recognition. The particular look of a man understanding, too late, exactly what he had chosen to overlook and exactly what it had cost him. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't have the words, because there weren't any. You have 30 days, I said. I hope you use them wisely. I picked up my bag and walked out. I drove to my favorite restaurant, the one Margaret had once called too quiet for any real occasion. And I sat by the window and ordered a glass of the good wine and felt for the first time in 3 years like I could actually breathe. Pauline told me later that Margaret stood in the driveway for over half an hour, that Daniel came back inside, sat down in the empty dining room, and didn't say a word to anyone for the rest of the day. Just sat there, finally, with the quiet he had chosen every time he could have spoken up for me. I hope it kept him company. I didn't leave that house feeling victorious. I left feeling returned to myself, to my own life, to the woman who had built something real and solid long before anyone told her she was a burden. Never mistake a woman's patience for passivity. Some of us are simply waiting for the right moment. And when it comes, we don't need to raise our voice even once. If you've ever been made to feel like you were nothing in a space you created yourself, this story was for you.